Welcome to the Individuated Bookshelf, a Sophia Psychos podcast for readers who know that the right book at the right moment can change a life. I'm your host, Bea Gonzalez. Through Jungian psychology, mythology, philosophy, and the Western esoteric traditions, I explore the texts and ideas that shape the inner world. This is a space for those who read, not just for information, but for transformation. In this episode, I invited my good friend, actor and educator Jeff Miller to come back on and talk about a writer I recommend often. His name is Robert A. Johnson, and I recommend him mostly to people who are beginning on their Jungian journey because it's very easy to read and explains things very clearly. And he uses story in a way that I really like to try to elaborate on some of his ideas. So I asked Jeff if he would kindly read one of the books by Robert A. Johnson called We, so we could have a discussion about the whole concept of romantic love. And so this is how it all went. So hello, Jeff. Thanks for coming back on.
My pleasure. I look forward to this discussion.
So let me start with this, and I'm taking this directly from the book that I asked you to read, which is the book by Robert A. Johnson, a well-known Jungian writer, called We. He says, romantic love is the single greatest energy system in the Western psyche. In our culture, it has supplanted religion in the arena in which men and women seeking meaning, transcendence, wholeness, and ecstasy. And so I want to start with that because obviously you read this for the first time, and I'm assuming you weren't acquainted with Johnson or this kind of thinking. So jump in. Tell me what you think.
Well, I wasn't acquainted with Johnson, but as I sort of mentioned to you in our email correspondence, I did find a lot of this outside of the sort of the in-depth Tristan and Isolde discussion. A lot of it is echoed in Hollis's writing.
Yes.
In terms of in the chapters that Hollis does on romantic love.
Right. I
want to just preface with 2 points. One is I find it a little bit nervous making. And why I say that is I feel sometimes like it's like 30-year-olds doing a podcast for 12-year-olds about why Santa Claus doesn't exist. Yeah. How dare you question this thing we hold as transcendent, as something that we're all reaching for. How dare you start talking about perhaps the genesis of it and how it is perhaps based in myth and perhaps a lot of it is still mythological. The other thing is, Bea, I wanted to mention to you, and I've mentioned it to a couple of friends of mine. I've had a number of relationships, a couple of them where I thought I was desperately in love, in quotes. I now question how in love I was, again, as a result of a lot of my reading of Hollis and this Johnson book. But I will tell you that if you go to a dinner party of any group of people in a Toronto location and you start talking about the fact that perhaps you don't believe in God, perhaps you are agnostic, perhaps you are fully atheist, and the reasons why, that is a conversation that will promote lots of other conversation, lots of back and forth. People will go, oh, you know what? I'm Catholic, but I have this problem, or I have left the church, or I came back to the church, or let's talk about where God is, or if God's there. It's a conversation you can have. Right. And it's often a lively and worthwhile conversation. However, if you sit around the same group of people and say, romantic love is a myth, it doesn't really exist, it's not anything based in reality. It is a projection that we all make because we are looking for the trend. Oh, Jeff, what is wrong with you? Why have you given up on life? I will tell you, and I think Johnson echoes this quite a bit in this book. Yeah. It is replaced our connection to God. That is my theory, and I think part of what Johnson and Hollis is talking about is totally. that it is heresy to suggest that romantic love, as beautiful as it can feel, as exciting, as invigorating as it can feel, that it's not going to last and in fact it is in its nature ephemeral.
Yeah, yeah. So great points all there. First of all, I would address the first issue of I am never telling a 30-year-old what to do, because we all have to bump into our own walls, right, as we move along.
I have no idea what age you are, by the way, but you may be 30 years old. I just
I don't think I am.
I just threw that out.
I think Jungian work generally is considered something you undertake at midlife, because you do have to build your ego. And Robert A. Johnson tells you that explicitly, that you must build your ego up so you can start dismantling it when you hit midlife. So I don't think anybody's advocating that we tell younger people, or even older people, really don't believe in romantic love. I don't even think that's what he's saying. I think he may be saying something different. We can talk about the way I'm looking at this. So no, I don't give these books to my young sons to read, because I think they will bump their heads. And by the way, that is the natural process of growth. And I'm going to quote somebody I quote often, my favorite Jungian, Marie-Louise von Franz, who states about this: if you didn't project, you wouldn't know yourself at all. Because the idea is we are constantly finding parts of ourselves in the people we're engaging with. And there's no more intense kind of finding or search that when we are actually projecting that kind of longing onto a human being. So no, absolutely. And I think it continues to happen. Sometimes when you're older, it might be projected onto ideas, onto philosophies, onto institutions. The whole of life is projection, because we are trying to retrieve parts of ourselves in some way. So no, absolutely. No one's saying that you're not going to do this. In fact, it's part of human nature. I think what Johnson is pointing to, that feeling of, giddiness and all the things we associate with romantic love does change over time. Maybe for some people it doesn't, but for most it does. And then there is an opportunity to perhaps deepen a relationship, because when you're projecting, you're not seeing the other person. You're seeing a part of yourself. It's not particularly fair to the other person. This is something James Hollis always points out to. And there's not a lot of compassion in it, because you're so wedded to that version of them that is not them. It's what you want to see. So that's just putting it out there. Now, where I do agree with you, and where Robert Johnson and where I think Hollis is saying, is that longing, right, that was once part of the spiritual journey, and it is still for many people, I've certainly encountered that longing in my own meditative experiences, has now been exclusively projected, mostly, and we know by films and the books and all the stuff that's out there, onto one thing, which makes it hard for real relationship to happen. Now, maybe it does for some people, but that is what they're pointing to, that if you're taking something that is such a large and strong and powerful energy system, like our connection to a transcendent reality, and you're putting it on a human being, that's going to, eventually that person's going to show up as a human, and you are going to
eventually they're going to disappoint. They're going to disappoint.
And
and how many studies have there been of marriages, long-term coupledoms, that eventually people will say, my partner disappointed me.
Yeah.
I felt like this is not what this was at the beginning. I mean, that is a trope that is absolutely entrenched in our culture.
Right.
We eventually get disappointed with the people that we are intimate with.
Right. And that is,
now that can be, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
That can be a mild disappointment. That can be the sort of the little mini disappointments of day-to-day living. Oh, geez, I wish he would change the bag for the garbage. Yeah. Or it can be much larger in saying, I can't live with this person that he is now or she is now, right? That these disappointments are so serious and so large that I don't have feelings for this person anymore.
Right. So, I mean, I think this is as you're saying, it's a pretty universal kind of experience. And it is something that is only troubling if it means that it's making you severely unhappy, and it does impact the relationships you have. And there is the phenomenon of the person who jumps around looking for the feeling as opposed to the person. So you're trying to recreate a feeling in yourself. Irvin Yalom, who's another writer I love, says that what we're really in love with is the feeling that goes in there. And so there's other ways to find it, so that you're not constantly in search of it, possibly doing damage to yourself and to others. But there's a bigger question, I think, that is in this book, and I think it's a really interesting one. It's the one that I think Jung addressed, and then all these other Jungian writers, including Johnson and Hollis, are constantly addressing. So they divide the world into masculine and feminine energies, which belong to all of us. There's not, I always get into these arguments with people. It's not gender based. We all have masculine and feminine, right? And Jung's real concern was that the feminine was grievously wounded. And what he meant was that the feminine as an archetypal energy is something that values relationship over power, right? Over power dynamics. It values being above doing, and it accepts and surrenders in a way that the masculine can never do. In an ideal world, you have a balancing of these energies. Clearly, we do not have that in the world. And the real concern about this is when you have that in a depreciated state or in an assailed state, you're making decisions, not only in your personal life, but collectively, that are wounding the world. Now, we know this economically, environmentally. I think you and I can both agree the kind of power dynamics that are out there with the techno-billionaires and the disregard for human beings, it's pretty scary. So they're actually, through the vehicle of something like romantic love, they're actually analyzing the whole concept of the feminine and its absence or its imbalanced state. And I think that's the real beauty of this actual story that he addresses. Because what they're saying, and Joseph Campbell said equally, is that in the 12th century was the first eruption of that feminine coming back online saying, hey, you know what? This isn't working. We have to bring this conversation back. So what happens is it gets projected onto women, first of all, obviously to in the Catholic Church, the Virgin Mary, but also then to just women in general, but it's not really addressing what's missing, which is what do we value? This is a big question for me. I mean, if someone says to me, what is the most important question? I will paraphrasing Paul Tillich, and his question is, your God is your highest concern. So what is our culture saying when we're valuing power over the kind of values that the feminine espouses, including relationship, including surrender, including the other, right? So what do you think of that?
I'm a little bit confused because I don't see, and maybe you can help me here. I understand completely the feminine and the masculine and how that nurture, that relationship based feminine qualities are so essential and necessary in a society. Absolutely. And the masculine, the search for power, the search for dominance needs to be there. But obviously now we live in a time that it's so imbalanced there and dangerous. Right. But I mean, and I'm just taking a step back from sort of some of the theory. I certainly do not assign the idea of the romantic or the romantic qualities or the search for romance, the search for that romantic other exclusively to the feminine or female. In other words, I'm just sort of saying from like a cultural standpoint, from what I'm looking at, men are can be horribly overcome with this idea of romantic love. Like even these powerful, domineering, but they are just like, she's just I'm sorry, but excuse me for using the heteronormative models, but she's everything well, how long have you known her? I met her this weekend, but she's, oh my gosh, she's just perfect. And I just like, it's like, wow. Okay. I find men and that idolizing of the female form and you're going to be everything to me. I find that just as prominent and as available.
Right. Okay. So I think the confusion here is you brought in feminine and female, and that's not what we're talking about here. The feminine, what you're saying a man is doing is they're finding their own inner feminine because they're not related to that, and then they're finding a woman to stick that on after they meet her over the weekend. That's a very different thing. So that's the one thing we have to get away from is gender categories. So romantic love, the reason it would be associated more with the feminine is because it values relationship above all else. Relationship, the things that connect together. Okay. Connection, right? Connection is a great word for the feminine. Whereas the masculine values separation. Now, we need both. If you don't have the separation, then you're just a muddle, okay? But what happened in the High Middle Ages is that you get the resurgence of that value system coming back online through story. One of the things that I've tracked and I love is the idea of an evolution of consciousness in some way. And evolution is a tricky word maybe, but how we're changing. And our stories are the biggest markers of how we change. You go from Helen of Troy, right? classical Greece, we take the feminine, we abduct her, we take her, and then we're going to fight over the feminine, right? To somewhere where relationship is so valued, you'll put your life on the line, which is what this story is ultimately about. But even in that story, you're getting the opposing of two values, the society, which is much more associated with structure and form, and the masculine versus the feminine, which is, I don't care, I love this person. So yeah, men do that even more. In fact, one of the most famous stories with Jung is that he was in conversation with the Nobel Prize winning physicist Wolfgang Pauli, who was this incredible intellect, but just had a horrible situation with women. He would fall in love with cabaret singers, would chase them around. It's almost like he needed that intellect balanced by some form of projection he was doing on these women. So I think that's a really important thing, because this is where people get confused when I quote any of these authors are thinking gender, and I want people to stop thinking about gender categories altogether. Men and women both need the feminine balance, just like women, by the way, need to have the sword, right? They need to be able to say, hey, this, not that. And I don't need to people please. I need to distinguish what's important. I need to put up boundaries. I mean, these are the two qualities. Unfortunately, the words just aren't very great. Feminine, masculine brings in too many associations with gender, right? But think of it yin yang, or I actually think of connection, discernment as the two opposites, right? The one connects, the other one discerns. Both are needed, absolutely. The argument is that the value that we place upon connection isn't particularly great right now, because we can say we love this or we love that, but then we're doing a whole bunch of things that are actually much more oriented towards power.
Well, I think of it's thinking contemporarily. I think of the current pejorative woke, and the idea that because I am learning about other people, trying to develop connections to other people and some empathy and compassion to perhaps groups that I'm not a part of or don't necessarily immediately identify with, then therefore the idea of being too awake, the inverse of that being I'm asleep, again, right. So right now, that to me is an example of this feminine that you're talking about, being discarded, being disparaged, right? Like, it's time for us to get away from this feminine, touchy-feely, let's learn about, let's help as many people as we can, because that's not what created the greatness of the the Western world, which was conquer, colonialism, power, strength. I mean, it is a remarkable time in history to be alive, Bea.
I think we're just trying to balance it out, because what you say is absolutely, completely 100% true. The whole feminine is inclusive. It tries to look at what's out there because it deals with heart, with emotions, feeling. Right, the feeling function.
Empathy. Think about somebody other than yourself.
Yes.
What are we being told now in contemporary culture? Let's go back to Ayn Rand, and it's all about you and what you can accomplish and who you can conquer.
It's individualism on a level that is toxic, and that's what you kept seeing. And you saw a form of masculine, which is toxic, and that's also unfortunate, because the masculine is as beautiful as the feminine. It's different. It is about discernment, and it allows you to take action, which we need. If you only had the feminine, you'd sit around basically eating, not doing anything. Mary Louise Valfrance famously said, because it's it's being, not doing. You need both categories. You need both things.
Let's go back to romantic love and sort of where. And perhaps you can articulate for me sort of the romantic love as symbolized by this story, Tristan and Isolde. Because I will just tell you really quickly, I wasn't completely, I mean, I knew of it, but I wasn't sort of intimately familiar with the details. But to me, and you can help me out here, reading the myth as retold in the Johnson book, and perhaps that's why Johnson includes a preface entitled For Women. But it seems that our dear Isolde doesn't have a lot of say in anything, that she lives in a society where she is chattel, that she is either somebody's daughter waiting to be possessed by somebody else, or the victim of a love potion that actually, I'm to then assume, takes away her actual choice, because then she's under the influence of a drug. And she's like, I had a problem with it from a feminist point of view, excuse me for appropriating, but in terms of, yes, I see Isolde and falling in love, and how that is part of the feminine and all that stuff, and how that's different than what we have known up to this point. But where is her agency? Like,
Well,
help me with that.
that's the problem, isn't it? Isolde, it has no agency because the feminine is you said shadow. It's not operating in an equal form. Now the love potion does affect both of them, right? But no, I mean if you think about historically, that would be accurate, and I think it's still accurate to many in many areas and many places. Let's be honest about this. So the feminine is basically bounds. It has no choice. And the reason that Tristan and Isolde becomes so powerful is they both make the choice. She makes the choice of not sleeping with King Mark. She substitutes somebody, right? So that it's not her. So she's actually making a choice, which is very courageous because it would lead to her death and his death. But you've made a very good point that that is the condition of the feminine. That's what the story is telling you. It is basically not allowed to function. But in the end, they both take action, which will put them against masculine values of this society, right?
And I will pull that out to the 20th century and the early feminist movement beginning, in the late 50s, 60s through the 60s, where women, the invention of the pill, the invention of the legalization of abortion, where women start to have true agency, and it is allowed for a certain amount of time, the excitement of this idea of women being able to make choices that are not dictated by men, or by society, but by their own wants, desires, whims, right? But it seems to have only been allowed for a certain amount of time because it's now time to put that all back in the closet. And that is what I am so angry and irate about.
I look at this again as I look at the balancing act, that something happens and then there's a swift reaction, or maybe it takes 40 years, which is what's happening. I don't think that the reaction is going to hold. That's my hope. We all have to fight to make sure it doesn't hold. But I think there's always a reaction when some part of us feels assailed, and the masculine, and it's more, I think,
patriarchy. Patriarchy.
Yeah, but patriarchy actually is not about the masculine. It's about a system of dominance and power, which takes masculine values. It takes masculine values. It's like women participate in patriarchy. So it's a system of power. It's very distinct from the masculine. It's just taking the values that the masculine represents and putting them on a higher threshold. But women participate in patriarchy. And I think this is really important. Marion Woodman made this case over and over again. Now we're talking about a larger economic system that for it to function, we have to have this patriarchal overlay. For it to function the way that the power structures want you to function. It's a much bigger thing, but I wouldn't say that's the masculine. I would say that those are the values prioritized by patriarchy so that we can continue to do what we do, which is total exploitation of practically everything, right? If you had a balanced system, right, then you would always take the value of the feminine, which would say, hey, I think we're destroying the environment, which is always associated with the feminine. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this, right? Or, I think this group is actually getting really damaged by this, whatever this is that we're doing, this law or whatever.
What if we actually talk about true equality, or at least having that as a real aspiration? And of course, in this is my opinion, in the patriarchy, in masculine, there's no room for equality.
No.
Equality is one of those feminine, woke, kumbaya, there's no place for that equality. And that is what's so threatening, because I believe in the last 75 years, we started to see some of that, at least in Western societies, some of that quality start to happen. I realize a long way to go. But what we're seeing now is a remarkable backlash, and it's across the world. It's around the world.
I would say that, yes, you're right, but this is a larger conversation. And actually, the reason I love the Jungian work, by the way, is because it's addressing what's underlying, what's undergirding this. It's not about
the shadow.
Yeah. This is it. This is it.
The societal shadow.
Yeah, we have exiled certain things that we can't. And you know this, right? Because you probably encounter it in choices you have to make, or whatever. We've exiled parts of our humanity that we can't cope with and that don't fit the structures that allow us to keep subscribing to this idea of growth, growth without end, which is interesting because that's what cancer basically is. So we're basically, the economic growth is just like spiraling until we're all basically dead. So I think the bigger conversation is, okay, how do we balance it in ourselves? And it has to start with ourselves, right? The idea that you go out into the world and try to balance it when you yourself are, not able to cope with it is where a lot of problems begin. And a lot of people engaged in political fights do not have that balance. They're super, like they attack the feminine because they are attacking their inner feminine. And if they understood this, then perhaps things would change. But you can't do it at a societal level if you're not doing it at an individual level.
Let's go back to romantic love, and
Okay.
perhaps you can talk a little bit about
Yeah.
your idea of, in a contemporary, in a modern context, what is it? I mean, I realize we have this connection to the 12th century, and we're seeing the beginnings of it starting to be talked about, or started being as an actual concept in humans' lives. But what is it now? What is it? What is it now for a person to come to you, let's say one of your children or something, to say, come to you and say, Mom, I am head over heels in love. Oh my gosh, I cannot tell you. I am so in love. I'm crazy. Just I can't stop thinking about this person, their everything. What as you, as somebody who is learned and has read as much as you do, and is interested in these concepts, not necessarily what you say to this person, but what do you believe is happening there? What is happening?
So I can only speak from my own experience and the experience of others and things we've discussed in my group for a while. I think you're connecting to a part of yourself that feels really alive, that feels connected to something greater. And I think that's the key to romantic love. It connects us to a greater reality. That's why it's so heady. It's like a drug. It comes into your body and you go, wow, I want more of that, more, more, more. And it's because you've just connected to something that is not rooted only in the ego. It's transcendent of the ego. And that is why it's such an important thing. And that's why, circle back to what you said at the beginning, I don't want people not falling in love. That is the way we connect. And we fall in love with many things, by the way, not just people, but like I said, many things. Art takes us there. That's, I think, why art is so powerful. You can have the experience without actually having to get messy or to hurt somebody. So I always say to people, if you're looking for a connection to love, why do you think rom-coms are so powerful? What and Juliet still resonate with us is because in the experiencing, in the Greeks, the classical Greeks, who I adore above all, really understood this. In that experience in the theater or in the movie theater or through a book that you're reading, you are allowed to experience those feelings of intense longing without necessarily having to end your relationship, right? So I think that's why art is so valuable. And by the way, the reason I love Joseph Campbell, I love Carl Jung, is they said that. They said the artist is always a little bit ahead of where the society is. They can connect to things before the society really keys in. And so why should we fund programs that value the arts? Okay, because that is what's going to allow us to translate those emotions in a way that has a container, right? Because that's what we're looking for, to be contained. So no, I would say beautiful. This is beautiful. That feeling is, everybody's looking for that feeling. I would also say, though, that I can understand why Johnson connected it to feelings of spirituality or religion, because that's what happens in a religious experience. Anybody who's ever had an intense meditative experience or prayer session or whatever will feel that something happened where they opened up, and having had this experience, it is overwhelming. It is. But often you can't hang on to it either, right? It's like you're there and you go, whoa. So all of this is beautiful, and no one's denying anyone the opportunity. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. That makes complete sense. Also, Johnson in this book, quotes Tristan from the myth a little later on in the book, and says, and so comes Tristan's talking about Tristan's search for this romantic ideal in Isolde. And so comes Tristan's famous question, will I never find someone to heal me of my unhappiness?
Yeah.
And I think that is key, because I believe that in most of us is a feeling of, at times, inadequacy, perhaps boredom, perhaps loneliness. Again, not all the time, just these feelings of, I'm never quite there. I'm never quite transcendent. But more to the point, I need someone to complete me. And by completing me, I will be a better person. I will be a happier person. I will be a more content person. I will even be a more successful person. Yes. And I think that is key to so much of this romantic love, this initial euphoria that happens, which is, oh my gosh. And I quoted to you, I think we were offline. We might have been offline a few weeks ago. There's a Connor McPherson play about a guy who drinks a lot. He's married, he has kids, but he always drinking in the bar without his wife. And he's always taking home another woman behind. And he knows he's screwing up. He knows he's not happy in his marriage, but he has these kids. And he approaches this woman in this play. It's called Rum and Vodka. And he doesn't say anything to her. He looks her in the eye and says, "Cure my life."
Yeah.
And that's from like 35 years ago. But I've always thought about that because that connected to me, because every person that I have gone, oh my gosh, he's so amazing. I just can't believe, my heart is disfigured. I'm like, what I'm saying is cure my life. I need you to do this better than I'm doing it.
Yeah. But let me give you, you're an actor, you've been on stage. Now, do you not find that the feeling you have on stage is equal to that feeling of being in love in a way that?
Occasionally. Bea, at my age now, also, I can tell you, I was in London last summer and I sat in a national theater production called Till the Stars Come Down.
Yeah.
It was 2.5 hours. And about midway through, I was sure I was floating above my seat by about 4 feet. I was sure I was blocking the people behind me because I was floating in the air. I was weeping. I was filled with a feeling of connection. I was filled with a transcendence. And I walked out of that play and I thought, what I do every time I feel a transcendence in whatever form, I'll never be the same.
Yeah.
That illuminated a part of something. I thought I knew it all. And the older I get, the more I realize you know nothing. And there's all this more to discover. And that's what transcendence is for me. So yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, and when I've been on stage, yes, I have felt the same way.
So you have just, with the words that you just described, you've basically described the feminine, and you've described it in a way that we didn't have to tack on a word that is so confusing to people. That experience of being alive, being in the moment, because at that moment you weren't thinking about yesterday, you weren't thinking about tomorrow. It is the experience we experience, or we have when we're in deep meditation. There's something about it that the world just falls away. You know what's happened? Your ego has dissolved at that moment. You are one. You are one with whatever you are engaged with. And that is why people are addicted to romantic love. You feel that. You feel that oneness, where the ego just calms down and you can fuse. And so my point, and you just made it brilliantly, is that can happen. And it does happen through the vehicle of art. Some people through sports, by the way. What do you think happens in an arena? They're just merging with other people and feeling very alive. We're going through the World Cup. This is what's happening on their streets, right? Now, I'm going to bring in Joseph Campbell, who said that what we're really looking for, and this is what I would also say to if someone came to me and talked about romantic love, is the feeling of the experience of being alive. So the experience is a connection to the body. So here's what it all comes down to. What you're looking for is to shut the mind off. And there is nothing that shuts the mind off better than being engaged in that way. Your mind just shuts the hell up. And I think the mind is what is causing a lot of the problems we have, right? It's beautiful. We need it. We need it to rationalize and think and create. It can also be the biggest issue in our lives because it can convince us of practically everything. Joseph Campbell used to be a 100-meter runner, almost made the Olympic team in the United States. And he remembers the peak experience of his life was running a 100-meter race where he ran really well and connected to his body. And the audience was cheering and he just merged with the whole thing. He just had this experience. That's because the mind went offline. So a lot of what Jungians also advocate, and other people in this world, is the body. You're trying to connect to your body and try not to escape from it.
But what's so interesting, what you're just saying there, Bea, is that what do we hear so often when people describe when they first fell in love with a person? It was like my mind shut off. It was like all of a sudden I lost my mind. People go, what is wrong with you? You are a smart, accomplished, successful, learned academic, and yet you're acting like this, like 10-year-old who's just got a new toy. You've lost your mind. But that term is a part of what we talk about so often, right? That just take this mind away and let me live in this temporary, euphoria.
Yeah. And so there's nothing wrong with it. Here's the ultimate thing. That is what we're looking for. But how about if I posit another idea, which is what maybe Johnson and Hollis would like us to remind us, and many other writers in this tradition. How about if we find ways to connect to that experience? Because, hey, we'd all love to be in love all the time. That would be great. Can we find other ways to connect to that experience that don't necessarily or doesn't necessarily include just that experience? I think what Johnson is saying is, hey, listen, you know what's happened? We've reduced everything. And that's why he says romantic love is the single greatest energy system in the Western psyche.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with it unless it becomes the only conversation we have with ourselves, the only experience we have. That's the issue, isn't it?
I agree. And in our society, sort of, as a pairing with that, the search for success, the search for financial success, the comparing yourself to everyone else in terms of your how much you make, how many houses you have, what's your like that. I mean, I think that along with this endless search for the romantic other. And sometimes with some of us, the consistent, like over and over and over and over again. Yeah. This time I know what I really want. And anyways, we're probably diverging a little bit, but isn't it also absolutely fascinating? I find it fascinating. Well, you've been to weddings, and where 6 months later, 2 years later, 11 years later, the people aren't still together. And you'll talk to the partner you're closest to, and they were like, "Oh, they're a nightmare. They were a nightmare. They're crazy. They were crazy." And I find it's remarkable how that power of positive attraction and the endorphins and dopamine that it releases, and that feeling of transcendence can then be filled with this animus and this loathing, like the same kind of powerful, oh my gosh, we're involved in the nastiest divorce and it's been on for 3 years, and they're an asshole and I can't stand them. And I mean, I'm not being cliche here. These are
that's
friends,
very common.
like friends of mine, like things. But I'm always like, hold on. Is this the same person that you sat with me and told me that you never thought you would find your soulmate?
Yeah. This is the problem.
Human beings are remarkable. Like we're worthy of study. Somebody somewhere in a university should study human beings.
Oh,
man, we got to get on this.
They're doing a job.
I just came up with an idea. I think somebody should study human beings and why we do what we do.
I think, again, this is why what Hollis and Johnson and the like write is really important, because what happened in that scenario is the more loaded the projection. It's the idea that if you have absolutely, yes, it's the absolutes, right? So it was very dangerous when someone is going la, la, la. When they come down, it's going to come down really hard. And I think this is why in many traditions they still do arranged marriages, and they have a pretty good success rate. And the reason is that they're matching people for long-term for long-term success. So, if you're in the same ideas, if you have sort of similar family patterns, etc., it's a way of kind of controlling for that aspect of the psyche that will just fall hard, and then everything is reduced to that person. But then the disappointments, they creep in, as they will, as you slowly take your projection back. And this is all about self-awareness and understanding, because ultimately Jungian work is about analysis, taking parts of yourself, looking at them honestly and saying, hey, this actually belongs to me, not the person I'm with, not this society. This is actually an issue for me, okay? And that allows you not to punish others for the things you are not holding because they're too heavy. And so this is why this work is so valuable, and why so much of what I've done in the last 20 years has been dedicated to getting the word out in any way I can. Because I'm still down to the fact that if individuals don't do this work, it won't matter what happens collectively. And I think, listen, Jeff, you said this earlier, we're living in the most batshit crazy period of human history that we've experienced, right? It's crazy. It's so out of control that you think, okay, what do you do? Their answer is start with yourself. Just stop. Yes, do all the things that are important to do, but please start with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And yes, and we hear that in Hollis over and over again, how that society shadow mirrors often what's happening individually, and therefore we can't necessarily do something about the society shadow, but we can all do something about taking responsibility for ourselves and living more consciously.
That's it. That's all we can do. And by the way, we're going to get it wrong, and you're probably going to fall in love with people here and there, and you're going to do this. But I think when you do it consciously, you can catch it. You can say, oh, some part of that person is representing something for me, and you feel alive, but you don't necessarily take action, right?
So to bring it back to the
Yeah.
romantic love, though,
Yeah.
isn't the very act of falling in love, the very process of falling head over heels in love, relinquishing consciousness? Again, the feeling of I'm unconscious. I'm out of my head. I'm not actually going. Not many people are able when they're. I mean, I'm sure it's
No.
happening, but when people are in the middle of that euphoria, to say, okay, I need to take a step back. Hold on. This is maybe what's not great about that person. Like it's part of us. This is why Hollis talks about that happening in middle age, right? When it
Right.
becomes time when we're able to look back and go, okay, there's things that are consistently not working for us. Maybe it's time to start doing this work. But certainly when I was 20 or 30, I loved living in the insanity. I love what are you doing, Jeff? I don't know. I'm moving to Boston to be with my lover, but you're illegal. Yeah, I don't care. It's like, but Jeff, live consciously. Think about your choices. No, I just want to,
No.
and I would have told you, like, go away. I love living in the I'm young and crazy and I'm smart and I'm talented and I just want to, and of course the 40-year-old Jeff goes, "Really,
Well,
honey? Really?
that's the point. That's the whole
Well,
point,
did
Jeff.
you make a
Yeah.
few mistakes?" Yeah.
Yeah, but you need that, and you need the mistakes to get where you are. Nobody is denying you that. The first half of life, we go back to the what Jung said in the stages of life. The first half of life is about the sun rising, which means you are going to encounter all these experiences that, in retrospect, will seem insane, out of control. I mean, we all lived that, right?
Ill-advised.
The ill-advised. But here's the problem, Jeff. People post midlife are still trying to rise with the sun, now realizing that now is the moment of reflection. And I think one of the reasons I think I was born an old person just to begin with, I was too serious for my own good. So when I found these, I went, yes, I've been thinking about this since my 30s. There is something fundamentally wrong at the heart of how we've set things up. And what I like about it is there is a period of action and falling and all that. And then if we can balance it, everything's about balance, right? With reflection, it doesn't mean, by the way, it doesn't mean that you won't keep falling in love. It doesn't mean, no, that's not what it's saying. It means that you will have the capacity to reflect on what's going on in your body at that moment and say, oh,
Yeah.
okay, and ask yourself some questions. But nobody's denying experience. To deny experience is silly anyway. You can't. But it's the idea of, can we bring reflection? Can we bring awareness? Can we wear that kind of thinking?
Well, I mean, and to circle back to our first discussion, I mean, I think I'm part of the reason why I'm still alive at the age that I'm at after some years of making some poor choices is because of the ideas that you introduced me to 30 years ago or however long it was, and starting me on the journey with James Hollis and living a more conscious life. I wasn't able to do it, but the seeds started to be planted, and they have. And because I have, this is what's exciting about this work, right? For me,
Right.
is that Hollis wasn't something I read when you recommended it in 1997, or I'm sorry, it wouldn't be that far back. It was like 2007, and I put it down and I didn't think about it. I actually kept reading it
Right.
from that moment till now. All of his different books, all of the different smaller books, like I kept going back to it. I can't even show you my iPad and all the annotations through all the hall. But I think it's part of the reason why I'm still alive
Yeah.
and getting more sane is because this work was planted when it was.
I got to tell you what's so interesting. You've just made the case for this whole podcast. The whole point of putting a podcast together for me was that in social media, I have been encouraging people to read these books since 2011 when I jumped on Twitter, the old Twitter. And I one of the best things that happens in that world is when I get the private message saying, I just read this book and oh my God, it made me, because look, reading can be an act that can change people. You don't necessarily have to go into analysis. I mean, it's great if you can. That can take you very far. But reading, the very act of reading people that have thought really deeply about these issues, who have experienced themselves, as Hollis did, the descent, right? And having to come back up. is invaluable. And I'll always be a big advocate. Books are my love. I've always been an advocate for, yes, do read these people. They're very wise. They will guide you where you need to go. Speaking of just going back to this masculine feminine that is at the heart of what Johnson says, and Hollis as well. One of the things we don't want to admit is that men have been as equally damaged, if not more so in some ways, because they're not even allowed to articulate some of this stuff, as women have been by this whole scenario. And there is a book in your reading. Did you ever bump into James Hollis's Under Saturn's Shadow?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And I want to now.
I'm pretty sure I have a copy of it. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to read from there because I posted this, because I think this is a book that I wish men and women would read. Because just as the feminine and women, by extension, have been damaged, this is what Hollis says, and I want you to comment about the 8 secrets men carry within, okay? Men's lives are as much governed by restrictive role expectations as are the lives of women. That's number 1. Number 2, men's lives are essentially governed by fear. Number 3, the power of the feminine is immense in the psychic economy of men. Number 4, men collude in a conspiracy of silence whose aim is to suppress their emotional truth. That really hit me hard, by the way, every time I read it. 5, because men must leave mother and transcend the mother complex, wounding is necessary. We can talk about that one because I think that's often misunderstood. 6, men's lives are violent because their souls have been violated. Another one that hits very hard, especially as a mother of 2 boys. Number 7, every man carries a deep longing for his father and for his tribal father, so an archetypal father. And number 8, if men are to heal, they must activate within what they did not receive from without. I think that applies to women as well.
I think those are all also right on the money. Absolutely. I will tell you that I have been involved in the past 10 years with, amongst others, a couple of men who are smart, successful, ambitious, all that stuff, and caring. However, when I would, in a time of crisis of my own, their own, ours, ask them about how they're feeling, can you describe, what do you, no, I don't talk about. I literally had somebody recently, like within the last couple of, when I was saying, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what's going on there. He literally looked me in the eye and said, I don't talk about myself. Yeah. And it wasn't a sort of a ploy to get me to ask more. It was like, stop asking me personal questions. Yeah. Like, and I was like, wow, what does that mean? I don't talk about myself. Like, I'm not going there. I'm not going there. I'm not going to start to uncover or to reveal something that I have guarded, and I have perhaps my upbringing or perhaps my society has told me will not serve me as a man.
It's heartbreaking, Jeff. You see the damage that this whole system has done, because what they're saying to you is, I cannot connect to my inner feminine. That is a scary place. And the inner feminine does connect to feeling, and they will be emotional. It's fine. It's almost like we shut that down. So I think it does damage to both. And I think sometimes, because we have, women have, when I think of feminism, I think it is a political movement we needed badly to bring equality on that political level and the social level. I think this is different. I think this is a movement that tries to bring equality on the emotional and connecting level, if you want to call it. And so when we exclusively say women have been damaged, we're leaving out a big part of the equation, because the masculine and feminine work together, right? They're balancing together all the time. And so I also posted just recently a little poem that was put by it's just beautiful, and something I've reflected upon because it hit me when I read it. And I thought, this is so true. And I'll just read it because it's very, very short. It's by Nayura Wahid, and from a collection called Salt. And she writes, I am relieved when I see the feminine presence in a man's eyes. It means he is a piece I do not have to bring to him. And I think that's beautiful, because it really speaks to what you're carrying. If you can carry it for yourself in any relationship, it doesn't matter what kind of relationship, if a person is carrying the feminine for themselves, and there are plenty of women, by the way, who are very shut down as well. Marion Woodman talked about this in Addiction to Perfection. They're raised in masculine values where you're going to succeed. Women who are encouraged to really value the masculine values above feminine above all. So it's affecting all of us, right? But it's the idea that that poem doesn't only speak to me about men. It speaks to anybody. If I can see the feminine in your eyes, I don't have to carry that for you. We can have a conversation where honesty is there. And by the way, aren't those the most incredible kind of relationships we have?
Hello,
That's a kind of
hello,
opening up,
hello.
right?
I mean, yeah, I have a number of friends. You're one of them where, you sit and have the conversation, and 20 minutes later, 45 minutes later, you feel energized and alive, and like you've made a connection, right? You've been pushed towards a greater understanding. You're not there yet. Let me bore you again, in case I start to sound like I've got it all figured out, or I'm figuring it all, like, or that I'm on some kind of plane where I'm still struggle every day to incorporate all of this.
Oh, yeah, me too.
But I'm so glad that I have it.
Yeah.
Let me again burden you with a quote from Donna Tartt's Goldfinch from the end of the book. It's not the one I read last time, but our narrator says, and I'm hoping there's some larger truth about suffering here, or at least my understanding of it. Although I've come to realize that the only truths that matter to me are the ones I don't and can't understand. What's mysterious, ambiguous, inexplicable. What doesn't fit into a story, what doesn't have a story. Glint of brightness on a barely there chain. Patch of sunlight on a yellow wall. The loneliness that separates every living creature from every other living creature. Sorrow inseparable from joy.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And that is the combination of those archetypal energies that go there. One of the things that many of the writers I really love will keep emphasizing is the ability to live with that, the opposites, the ambiguity, not having to generally reach out for certainty, for confirmation. That is the biggest gift we can give to ourselves and to others, because I think it is this reaching out for, this is it. This is the thing that will save everything. In a world where everything is so complicated. And so you think, okay, well, we go back to this whole book that we're discussing. If we understand how to relate to these archetypal energies within in a balanced way, then I think that's more possible. You're not necessarily reaching because you're always taking the other into account, right? They have to be in balance. And so I would think the Jungians, and this is why I run a dream group, by the way, Jeff, because what you do in dream interpretation is what you're basically doing when you're creating a novel or anything, or anything that you're doing that's engaged in a creative act. The reason Jungians really value dream world above everything is the conscious mind goes offline, and you're getting, in a metaphorical way, you're getting the shadow elements often, and parts of yourself having a voice. And when you really do a lot of work in this area, it is bizarre, and I've done this for like close to 20 years with my group, how you see the personal narratives coming out of each person, and they're being replicated in a different way. It's fascinating. And so Johnson writes a book that I always recommend people read called Inner Work, where he actually details why this is important work. When you're engaging with your inner reality, you are not finding it and locating it in the outer world. Okay.
Right.
So
right,
I think
right.
it's a form of balance. And so the way Jung saw dreams, for example, and this is very important, is this compensation for your conscious attitude. Now I'm going to argue something else, and maybe you will agree to this because you experienced this and you told us about this in this episode. I find that when I'm focusing on the art that affects me is also compensation for something. It is bringing alive some part of me that isn't quite there, which is why I think we're also attracted to certain writers, to certain works, to certain, whatever, artistic works, painting even. You are constantly being called by parts of yourself you refuse to bring online because they're scary or overwhelming through this experience. But there isn't anything as powerful as the inner world, your own inner world, which is why journaling, why doing anything that allows you to escape that kind of confines, and it's very personal, nobody has to know about it, is so powerful. I will say that if you do dream interpretation in a group, something happens that is magical. Like, I can't even explain it. It's better than any novel. 5 hours of this and you go, okay, what the hell is going on? Because you are engaging with a part of the person that is the most honest, because dreams make you humble. They reveal parts of yourself you really don't want to talk about. So anyway, right. I don't know if I'm a big advocate for doing this kind of work because I have seen it and it's amazing.
I think anything along these lines of moving from what's out there to what's in here in a way that is going to go deeper than the surface, that is going to challenge us. You were talking about art. I go to concerts, music. I love classical music. This sounds like some ad on a dating site, but I like a lot of this stuff because it challenges me. Sometimes I don't understand it. Sometimes it raises opinions or ideas that I don't necessarily agree with, or I'm ambiguous or ambivalent about, or I that's what I love. I love the ability to be challenged and to go deeper.
Yeah.
That's such a cliche, that term,
No,
but
no,
you
no,
know
I know
what I
what you
mean.
mean,
I
though.
mean,
I know what you mean.
people. Anyways, I'm like, I don't want to get to it, but this whole idea of I'm just going to watch. I talk about this with my students all the time. I'll say, "What did you do on the weekend?" "Oh, I watched Netflix." "What did you watch on what?" "Well, I don't know what it was. I watched Netflix." I'm like, what doesn't that's our issue, that it's just I just have something flashing in front of my eyes. That's all I need, right?
Right.
Be challenged, find a story, get involved.
Yeah.
Um, anyways,
Let's finish with this because it
yeah,
goes circles back to the
yeah.
myth. Okay, my favorite opera is Parsifal by Richard Wagner, but the most famous opera, really one of his most famous operas, is Tristan and Isolde. Right? He took this
Mhm.
story and he did something insane with it, something that has changed the whole history of Western music, really. Because first of all, I bring him up in this particular opera because he's a great example of what Jung saw as compensation. This was a horrible man. He was anti-Semitic. He basically cheated on every wife. He stole people's wives. He was terrible. In every single way, he was terrible. And it's a great mind by the name of Father Owen Lee, who used to give the talks at the Met. And he wrote a great book called Wagner, A Terrible Man and His Truthful Art. And in that, he talks about art as compensation, right? What are you compensating for? So that part of you that is not really integrated comes out in your artwork. And he was immensely talented, as crappy individual, but really talented. And what he does with Tristan and Isolde is so incredible. I don't know if you've seen the opera, or I've only seen it recorded. It's not staged that often. It hasn't been staged.
No, I haven't seen it. I've listened to parts of it, but I haven't seen it.
It's very difficult to sit through 5 hours. And the reason is because what he did musically was he sat down and said, well, how do I represent longing for somebody that is so strong that it's like overwhelming? So he uses something called the unresolved chord, where the music keeps going. Usually when you're listening to music, it goes up and then down. It's a natural resolution. Well, he keeps doing this with different variations until the last piece called the Love Death aria, which you've probably heard. It's not really an aria, he didn't write arias, but the piece of music where Tristan is dead, Isolde is standing over him, and she sings this thing where she takes that chord, and then it's insane. It's just like, total explosion. And then she dies, of course, because the whole idea is that this can never exist in life at all. And Owen Lee famously said that, and by the way, of this opera, people have said you're lucky to come out of it alive because you're in such a state of tension, like the whole way. It's crazy. But only said that what Wagner was doing this was very much trying to connect to his own inner feminine. And he did it through this incredible story, which speaks to this, the whole thing that Johnson analyzes. And when you listen to that, and I'm not asking people to listen to a 5-hour opera, especially because a lot of people hate Wagner with good reason. He's more difficult, and a lot of people ideologically can't even listen to his music. I get it. But it is such a great experience for what it does to your body, because in that kind of experience, and that you are feeling that tension that is just overtaking you, which is the kind of tension you feel when you're in that in love state. Anyway, that is the artwork that I think best associates, and it connects to, that's why I bring it up, it also connects to the story that Johnson analyzes here.
Well, now I'm going to listen to the whole opera.
No, you have to report back. You have to come back
rather
and say,
than
well.
the 3-minute segments on the subway. I'm listening. Yeah. No, yes, again, transcendence, right? The ability of art to do something to us that is unexpected, that is deeper than the surface, but is filling our insides, and our minds, our hearts, our viscera. It is enormously exciting, and how much of a privilege it is that we are still here to be able to experience some of this.
Yep. And that we have that it's accessible in so many different ways. So when you say that to your students, that's what you're saying. You're saying, come on, like this is the kind of connection. I notice the young people are now watching things as they're listening or on their computer or on their phone. It's like, okay, I won't, Jeff, my kids laugh at me. I won't watch anything on Netflix because I'm such a ridiculous reader. Okay. I'm just a reader, and most of it is like something that just gives me a headache.
It's eye candy. And there's nothing wrong with things. But if one more person tells me, oh, I don't want to watch a movie and think. I just want an escape. I just want an escape. And then, of course, you and I would say, why do you need to? What are you trying to escape? Well, you don't understand my life. I have a high-powered job. You don't understand. My boyfriend's giving me troubles. My mother is sick in a home. Don't tell me I can't escape. I'm like, you're right. But what if you actually engaged with something that actually helped you think about the world a little different?
Right. It might not be an either or. It might be a both and, right? It might be like sometimes you can have a little escape. What I'm finding is like, again, a complete imbalance. You're just doing that. You're just escaping all the time, but you're never really there. And so then you get to 80 and you've missed your entire life. And I refuse to do that. And I have refused to do that now for a long time. It's not going to
let's just end, Bea, with reminding the kids that romantic love is great. You're going to love it. Find somebody that you're crazy about and fall in love. Lose your head. We promise we're not denigrating or telling you that you shouldn't be doing this wonderful part of being alive.
Oh, and just to say that applies to everybody, not just no. It's a good thing, and I think we can remind everybody it's a beautiful experience. But with awareness, I think it can be an experience that is magnified in different ways. That's all you're adding. You're adding a bit of awareness, right? That's all we can do. Jeff, thanks so much for jumping on again. Of course, you'll be back because I'll invite you back. And there's so many subjects in this area that you can go on and on forever. But thank you so much for joining me today.
Always a pleasure, Bea. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you would like to know more about the Sophia Psycho projects or the work I do, please go to sophiapsychos.com. Until next time.